Good evening. Hope you're all well. Today we're learning Maseches Sanhedrin Tav Tes Zayin, and we're starting at the two dots, 10 lines from the bottom of Tes Vav Amud Beis. As you just take a quick cursory glance at Daf Tes Zayin, you'll see that it is not short. And also, I ran out of time, so we're only doing one blot. I don't know when we're going to catch up, but we will. Not sure either. No, no, I looked. I know. And if you look at Yud Tes is like a monstrosity. I don't know what to tell you. We'll find time.
We've always done it.
We'll always catch up. By the time June 7th of 2027 rolls around, we got some time. Okay, so the Gemara here says Rabbi Akiva Omer v'chule, and it says Rabbi Akiva Hainu Tanakama. This goes back to the conversation from yesterday about killing undomesticated animals, and it seems to be that both Rabbi Akiva and the Tanakama are okay killing undomesticated animals. So what's the difference between them? Zog the Gemara that according to Rabbi Akiva, a snake, just kill it. Everything else requires a little bit more of a cheshbon, but a snake you can just kill. And this is quoted here in Rashi, the 12 lines or so from the bottom, the Tanakama Gimel. According to the Tanakama, it still needs chav gimel. You have to kill it, but it's chav gimel. Rebbe Kiva be'enach sfir leika. He doesn't agree to that. Sfir leika say bar minachash. She holds that the halachas by nachash are different. Good. One sugya under our belt. Then we said Ein Dunin, this was talking about a shevet. A shevet has to be judged with a certain amount of people. Hi shevet achata b'mai. What was their avera? What chait did the shevet do that they required the numbers that we had said in the Mishnah of 71? So the Gemara says, Ilema shevet shechila les haShabbos. That can't be. Amar de palig rachmana ben yechidim lemeruben lenyan avodas kochavim. When it comes to avodas kochavim, so there, if it's a yachid, it's 23. And if it's everybody and irhani dachas, it's 71. But bishar mitzvos mi palig. But we don't have that by Hilchos Shabbos. So where could we get to 71 with a shevet, right? By Hilchos Shabbos, we wouldn't get to 71. By Hilchos Shabbos, we judge every individual with 23. I don't care how many of us are Machal Shabbos.
So you have to have 1,000 court cases?
Yeah, 1,000 court cases of 23 people. Absolutely. We're not Machalik. We don't punish the city in a broad way for Hilchos Shabbos in a way that demands 71. It could be, by the way, I could be wrong, Gerald. It could be that we do all 1,000 people with 23 judges. I don't know how it works. I guess if they all did the same Avera, if they're different Averas, are the Eidim different? They're probably separate cases. But my first answer is probably right, but I'm just covering my bases. But b'sha'ar mitzvos mi palik, there is no difference between the isser of a yachid and the isser of a tzibur, of the isser of a whole shevet when it comes to that. Ella, it must be b'shevet shehudach that we're talking about where a shevet did some avodah zara. Says the Gemara, that can't be l'meimra de bedina de rabim dainin only. Are you trying to say that we would have a scenario where dina de rabim is different? Take a look at Rashi, 5 lines from the bottom. They were maskal l'meimra. The name of the shevet shalem shehudach bedina de rabim dainin le. We would treat them as a group. Kedina di irhanidachas the mikri merubin dainin le b'saif with Sanhedrin gedola. Would we in fact treat them this way, where they would be with saif and with Sanhedrin gedola? Shevet shehuda, says the Gemara. Come on, that's like nobody. Lo Rabbi Yoshia, lo Rabbi Yonasan. The Tanya. Ad kama osin ir hanidachas. What is the measure of a city that is a city of ir hanidachas? This is like Yedias, Shas Yedias. This is a clutch brisa. Look at this. Miyud ve'ad kuf divi Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yoshia holds that the size of a city for ir hanidachas ranges between 10 people and 100 people. We mamish don't even have cities like that in our neck of the woods. I've driven down, as many of us have, down Illinois. Maybe Bekoshi Rav, there's a tiny little sprach on the map. I did a bris like this in Sharon. It was called Sharon, Wisconsin, as a dot. I think there were 40 homes in the whole community. That was that mice I told you about where the woman told me after the bris. By the way, I forgot to tell you my mother's a yid. Okay. Anyways, it's very rare according to Rabbi Yoshia, so that can't be, our Mishnah won't be according to him. And Rabbi Yonasan Amar Mikufa Ad Rubo Shel Shevet, he says Irani Dachas is up to Rov. But if everybody does this, he wouldn't say that we would treat it like an Irani Dachas. So we have nobody like whom our Mishnah could accord. We don't know what the Isser was that the Shevet had to do to require 71 dayanim. So the Gemara says, bottom line of Tezvav Amar Beis. Amar Masna Hacha. We're not talking about the whole shevet. The nasi shevet shechata asnina. We're talking about the nasi of the shevet. All right. So the language in the Mishnah is not so meduyak. The language in the Mishnah should have said nasi. It's talking about the nasi. That's what the Mishnah maybe is talking about when it says we need 71 for a shevet. So let's analyze. After all, Milo Amar Ravada Baravam, we're going to see this a couple of times today. It's actually going to be a little confusing. It's not really so complicated in content, but we're going to see the same source a few times. And sometimes when that happens to us in Daf Yomi, it like is a little head spinning. But if we hold cup, you'll see it's not so complicated. It's just seeing the same source a few times. So here, what did Ravada Barabba teach us? Kol davar hagadol yaviu elach. Remember the conversation of Yisro and Moshe. Anything that's davar gadol yaviu elach, they'll bring it to you. That's what the Gemara says. That they'll bring it to Moshe. Dvarav shel gadol. These are massive cases. What? So hainami gadol. That's what's happening over here. It's a case of a gadol. It's a case of a nasi. So perhaps when the Mishnah says that we need 71 Jews by a shevet, we're talking about a nasi who is a davar gadol. He's a chashuv azach. He's a chashuv a person, the nasi. Ula disagrees. Ula Amar, no. What is our Mishnah talking about when it says that we need 71 for a shevet? Rabbi Lazar, Amar Rabbi Lazar, beboin al iske nachlos. We have shvatim who are arguing where the border is between Binyamin and Yehuda. They butt up against each other. Whose house is this? Oh, I thought the line was over here. You thought the line was over there. So they have to go ask a shaila. Who do they ask the shaila to? Not the Rav of their shul. They have to go to the Bezin Sanhedrin Agdola of 71. Ukitchilasa shel Eretz Yisrael. No different than the original divvying up and bordering of the Shvatim of the Jewish people by Yoshua. What happened? Matchilasa shivim ve'echad, Avkan shivim ve'echad. So now we have two viable answers. We have the answer of Rav Masna, who says we're talking about a nasi. That's when a shevet, when a nasi is chata, that's when a shevet needs 71. But according to Rav Elazar, no, we're talking about a case of shvatim who are disagreeing about boundaries, about the apportioning of Eretz Yisrael. There we need 71 to answer the question. Says the Gemara, not so pashut. Imat chilas, if you're going to say that it's so similar, that our case of a machlokes, this is the answer of Rabbi Lazar. If you're going to say that Binyamin and Yehuda are arguing about the boundaries of their apportioned piece of land, and you want to say just like the tchila of when Yoshua did it, no, we learned about this in another Masechta. Imat chilasa kalfi, we had a lottery, urim v'tumim v'chol Yisrael. The scenario there was very different. Then maybe afkan kalfi v'urim v'tumim v'chol Yisrael. If you're going to say we're going to compare a machlokas between Binyamin and Yehuda about borders, and it was just like when Yoshua did it, then it has to be just like when Yoshua did it with Kalfi and Urim V'tumim. That's not what it says. It just says, so therefore the Gemara rejects the answer of Rabbi Elazar and says, Rabbi Masna. We hold like Rabbi Masna that the case in the Mishnah of a shevet that requires shivim ve'achas is the case of the nasi shevet shechata. Ravina goes back on an answer that we rejected. Ravina Amar la'olam b'shevet shehudach. We're going back to a case scenario where we have a shevet shehudach, a shevet that began to worship avodah zarah. The kasha we asked on the bottom that neither Rav Yoshia or Rav Yonasan would match. You're absolutely right. Afal gav de katalinan b'yachid, even though they're killed with the same punishment of a yachid of skila. I think it's skila. Did I just? The Katlina b'yachid, b'skila, that's what Rashi says. Beidina derabim dainina le. It's true, the punishment is the punishment of a yachid, but it's done in the presence of a bezdin shel shivim ve'echad. Very, very unique answer, where we're kind of living in two worlds at the same time. Normally, we would have said that the city of an ir nidachas is b'sayif. So when it's a shevet, it's different. When it's a shevet, so then the punishment is beskila, which is a different onesh. However, it's done in a bezdin shal shivim ve'achas. After all, says the Gemara, Milo Amar Reb Chama bar Reb Yosi Amar Reb Oshaya v'hotzeisas ha'ishahu os ha'isha ahi v'gomer. Ish ve'isha, individuals atamotzi lisharecha. You take them to the sha'ar, which is a veiled reference to a bezdin ketana, Sanhedrin ketana of 23. But when it comes to the whole city, that we don't do with 23, that we do with 71. Hachanami bayis shevet. Says the Gemara, ish v'isha tamote lisharecha v'yatamote kol hashevet kulo lisharecha. That when it comes to a whole city, so then zogs the Gemara in the name of Reb, who is the answer from Ravina, that we're talking about a shevet shehudach. So now we have two lasting answers, right? When we when we do like, like in math equations, when you're like canceling out the right side of the equation, we scratch, oh, there's an x squared over here, there's an x squared over here, because it's just minusing, it's easy. Says the Gemara, we're going to do the same thing over. When we look at all the answers, okay, that answer scratched out. But here we have two answers that remain. We have the first answer that we saw on the bottom line of Tes Vav Amud Beis, that the shevet that requires shivim v'achas is nasi shachata. And we have the answer of Ravina, that we're talking about shevet shehudach, but again, in this unique way where there's a blend. That yes, it's a shevet shehudach, they're all worshiping Avodah Zarah. The capital punishment will be through skila, but afal, and normally with nirani dachas it would have been b'sayif with a sword, but it's done with a bezin shel shivim v'achas. Third of the way down, 6 lines before the wide lines on Tes Zayin Amud Aleph. Lo es navi sheker. Minani mili. How do we know the halachos of a navi sheker? Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. Asya hazada mizakein mamre. If you have the psukim on the side, come join me. I have Os Katan Gimel for the first pasuk. Acha Navi Asher Yazid Ledaber Davar Bishmi Eis Asher Lo Tzivitziv Ledaber Vasher Ledaber B'Shem Elokim Acharim Umeis HaNavi Hahu. So the Gemara says that's one pasuk talking about a Navi Sheker, and the second one is Va'isha Asher Yaseb Zadon Le'Vil Tishmo Ala Kohen Ha'omed L'Shares Sham. This is someone who doesn't agree to the Kohen. He rejects the base. He rejects the Sanhedrin. He's a Zakin Mamri. So what do we see from a Zakin Mamre? Malaholim b'shivim ve'echad, just like by Zakin Mamre at 71, Afkan b'shivim ve'echad. Perfect. So we have a Gzera Shava that links what we know from Zakin Mamre to what we don't know by Navi Sheker, and therefore both of them are in a Sanhedrin Gedola of 71. Says the Gemara, V'hai hazada kiksiva b'ktalahu dechsiva b'ktala be'asrenu tlasahu. I don't understand. When we talk about Hazada and the Psukim by Zakin Mamre, we say Umeisai Shahu, he's going to be killed. But Dinei Nefashos are usually B'chav Gimel. So Mehecha Tesi, that by Zakin Mamre, it's Shivim Ve'achas, so that when we have the Gzeira Shava, we bring it back over here to Navi Sheker. Mehecha Tesi. The Pasuk doesn't say that. The Pasuk says it's a case of capital punishment of Chav Gimel. Well, the Pasuk doesn't say Chav Gimel, it just says Meis. And when we deal with Dinei Nefashos, it should be Chav Gimel. So Mecha Tesi says the Gemara that by Zakein Mamre, it's Shivim V'achas. Perhaps it's a regular case of capital punishment. Amaresh Lakish, you're right. Gamar Davar Mehamra also. We're talking about another pasuk that speaks about the rebellion, the Hamra also, the rebellion of. One of them is the first pasuk that we saw, of Achan Navi. That's one pasuk that talks about the Navi Sheker, where it uses the word Daber or Davar, either one. And then the next pasuk is pasuk Hey on the side there, Vasisa al pi hadavar asher yagid lechem in hamakom hu ashivchar Hashem shamarta la'asos kechol asher yorucha. Someone who rebels against the Rav, and that's davar. That's talking about the Chachamim. So now we see a link between Navi Sheker and the Hamra, the actual rebellion of a Zakein Mamre. It says the Gemara, wait one second. If that's true, v'lehadar Zakein Mamre uveligmar hazad min Navi Sheker. Maybe we should reverse the learning and learn from Hazada from Navi Sheker to Zakein Mamre and say it's Chav Gimel. Why wouldn't we do that? Says the Gemara, according to this Shita, we can't. Davar Gamir, the Gzeira Shava, according to this Shita, that is a tradition that he has. That Gzeira Shava he has in his list from his Rebbe as a Mesorah. However, Hazada lo Gamir. However, when it comes to the Gzeira Shava of Hazada, so there the Gemara says that he didn't have that Mesorah. We are not allowed to make up Gzeira Shavas. There's a lot of pasuk by the Ber Hashem and Moshe Limor, and however many times you don't get to say it by the Ber over here, by the Ber over there, and then transfer halachos. You don't get to do that. We don't know how these things work. We have no idea. And in fact, I have this in my oversized sitter for the legally blind that I have on my stender. I have in Rabbi Shmuel. I wrote there on the side of my Gemara, we have no way of learning Torah without these principles. And one of them is this, Gzeira Shava. But we don't know how a Gzeira Shava is developed.
So
there has to be a Mesorah.
Connection between A and B.
Yes.
And the Chachamim were left to connect the dots, which is why you see a sugya sometimes back and forth. Almost like they're pulling it out of a hat.
Almost, correct.
Oh, that didn't work, let's try it. They're not just trying, it's
correct.
They have a Mesorah
exactly
that they needed to hook up.
Yeah. So that's what the Gemara is telling us here, is that Davar Gomer, we had the Gzeira Shava tradition, we had the Mesorah by this one, Davar, and therefore we can learn Shivim Va'achas back to Navi Sheker. But the Hazada, he didn't hold. I'm sorry, I don't have that Mesorah. So it's exactly what they were saying. Sometimes people say, the Gemara is loosey-goosey. Like no, it's not at all. It's super rigid. The Gemara, the methodologies of the Gemara are not negotiable. Sometimes we have klalu pradu klal versus ribui umiut. Very complicated. Why didn't Rabbi Shmuel include ribui umiut in the Gemara, in his brisa? Lo yodea. But whereas people sometimes from the outside, they look in and say, these rabbis fight about it. No, it's so well structured and so well oiled that someone who's steeped in Gemara would know that the last thing that you could say about the halacha system is that it's loosey-goosey. That's just, you're nam haaretz. If you ask the question, you're nam haaretz. It means you're not holding in the methodologies of how Gemara is learned, which most people aren't. Like I've had this on airplanes before. Yeah, the rabbis make stuff up. I'm like, yeah, no, they don't. No, they don't. Not one thing that's in the Orthodox psak is made up. Zippo. Nothing. Zero. Pick an area in halacha. How you tie your shoes, it's rooted in Gemara X, Y, and Z. How you put on your kippah. Everything is documented perfectly. So this is just a good reminder of the Brisa of Rabbi Shmuel, and it's one of the reasons we say it every day. We say it every morning to remind ourselves that our Talmud Torah is not arbitrary. We're looking at the lens of Rabbi Shmuel to understand the Chumash. The Chumash is unintelligible without this. We wouldn't know how to live. We would never have made this link of Davar. We wouldn't know that it's a bezin of Shivim V'achas by Navi Sheker without it. Okay, halfway down, second of the wide lines. What about the Kohen Gadol? How do we know the halachas about a Kohen Gadol and Rabbi Bar Ava? We saw this pasuk already. Remember, don't let your head spin. It's the same pasuk. Same thing as before. No different than the Nasi at the top of the page. You're a great person. When you're a great person, you fall into the category of Gadol. You need to be treated with Shivim V'achas. You need to have the bezin of Sanhedrin Gedolah. Says the Gemara, hold on 1 second. I know another version of this brisa. Meisvei. Gemara says we have a brisa. Davar gadol, not a person who's a gadol, but davar kasha, a topic that's difficult. So that's very different. We tried to say that both a nasi and the kohen gadol is in the category of an adam gadol, which they are, but it's a drasha. So what if the drasha changes that when a pasuk says davar gadol, it's not talking about a great person, but a difficult topic? Remember, Yisro and Moshe were talking. That's what the pasuk says. He's saying to Moshe, a difficult topic that comes to you, you should be the one to be the posek achron. Ata omer davar kasha. You want to try, you the brisa want to try and say that davar gadol means davar kasha. Oh, davar of shel gadol. Maybe we're talking about a person who's great. The Gemara kshu omer es davar kasha. Yivinu el Moshe arei davar kasha amor. So now we see a kasha, is that the pasuk that Rav Ada bar Ava used to tell me that the Kohen Gadol is a Gadol, and therefore we need Shivim V'achas, that Brisa has another version that seems to say not that the pasuk means a dvar of shel Gadol, but rather a difficult sig, a davar kasha. So says the Gemara, Hu da Amar Ki Tana. There is a precedent for that. There are other Mar Makomos that agree with that drasha. The Tanya, 2/3 of the way down, 5-6 lines into the wide lines. Davar Gadol, Dvar of Shel Gadol. Ata Omer, Dvar of Shel Gadol, Eloino, Davar Kasha. Kshe Omer, Davar Kasha, Ere Davar Kasha Omer. Hamani Mekayim, Davar Gadol, Dvar of Shel Gadol. So we see that there are two different applications of the same pasuk. Asks the Gemara, V'hai Tana Trei Kroye Lamali. Why do you have to say the other Tana who doesn't hold this way? Why does he need to have two psukim? So it says the Gemara, Chad tzava be'alma, v'chad le'asiya. One is talking about the tzava of the system that Yisro asked Moshe to implement. That was the tzava, v'chad le'asiya. And one was the implementation of that, but they both mean exactly the same thing. I ve'idach im ken lichtov o gadol gadol o kasha kasha. If you don't want me to learn two things from the pasuk, then stay consistent in your language. Don't say gadol and then kasha, and don't say kasha and then gadol. Just say gadol gadol or kasha kasha. My gadol or my kasha, shma min atarte, that I can learn out both. Then the Gemara, speaking about a kohen gadol, brings a little bit of a mini second sugya for 5 or 6 lines. Boy Rebbe Lazar, shoro shel kohen gadol bekama. How do we look at the shore of a kohen gadol that kills? Lemisas bailim didei midaminanle. Do we compare the killing of the shore of a Kohen Gadol like the Kohen Gadol, and just like the Kohen Gadol is always judged with Shivim Ve'achas, because he's Dvar of Shel Gadol, and therefore Midaminan Le, we would also adjudicate a case where his shore killed with 71. O dilma lemisas bailim de alma midaminan le. Or no, we're just talking about a regular balabas as though he's a regular balabas, and therefore it would be with 23. Now the Gemara doesn't really answer this question, but it does something very Jewish and says, "Oh, I heard your question. You know what I had just learned from you, Amar Abaye, because you just asked your question about a shore, as to whether or not the shore of a Kohen Gadol, when it kills, is judged like the Kohen Gadol with Shivim Va'achas, with Sanhedrin Gadol, Mechlal, that a regular simple case, de Mamono, that is judged Pshitale, that it's a regular Bezdin of 3. A little bit of a jump. I don't really see how the diuk happened, but we would need Rishonim for that. Says the Gemara, Pshita Abaye. That's not even a hard question. Says the Gemara, no, Abaye is teaching something so important about the Kohen Gadol. I might have thought that the Kohen Gadol is on such a high level that any court case, no matter what, any court case is b'shivim v'achas. Says the Gemara, Kamash Malam, what Abaye was teaching us is no. We don't say Shivim V'achas by the Kohen Gadol everywhere. It's only in limited cases. Pashat a Mamonis case, if somebody has a taina, I can't imagine a Kohen Gadol being brought to Bezin for petty theft. I can't imagine. But if it would, do we need Shivim V'achas? Abaye is teaching us, no, we don't. We said Ein Motziin, we're at the 2 dots, 10 lines from the bottom of the page. This was talking about going to war. And we said we need rishus from the Sanhedrin to go to war. This is a lengthy pasuk, and you can look on the side and read the whole thing. Let's parse it out into pieces. When the pasuk says who, that's a reference to Zeh Melech. The king needs to start the conversation about war. That's a reference to the Mashuach Milchama, who, as we've seen in Shas numerous times before, was a Kohen who would go out to war and be mechazik the troops. He was the clergy. He was the chaplain of the army with a higher level. I was saying he was Mashuach Muhammad. V'chol ha'eda zeh Sanhedrin. So what do we see? We see that the Sanhedrin needed to give rishus for Klal Yisrael to go to war. Pashut. Right now we're in the middle of a war, so we don't have a firm government. So the government made a decision. Netanyahu and his cabinet, they made a decision to go to war. In the times of the Beis HaMikdash, that would not be an autonomous decision. No autocrat could decide that. It would have to go to the Bezdin Agadol. Maybe it's not that the Bezdin Shel Shivim V'achas has to paskin, yes, you can go to war. No, you can't. Perhaps what the Bezdin has to do is read off the Urim V'tumim. Maybe they're not making their own decision about war. Maybe they're just looking at the Urim V'tumim of the Kohen Gadol. That's a good question. Says the Gemara, Ela ki hada amar of Acha bar Bizna amar of Shimon Chasida. And this is a famous story that we all learned 5 years ago, Kimat. Says the Gemara, this was early on in Maseches Brachos, Daf Gimel. Kinor haya talui lemala mimitaso shel David. There was a harp, or a lyre, as it's called in the art scroll. I don't know what that is.
What that means.
Lyre. It's an instrument of sorts. But anyways, there was some type of stringed instrument that was hanging over his bed. Every night at midnight, there was going to be a northerly wind that would push through. I guess his windows were open. And then the wind would hit the harp and it would make a particular sound. By the way, the language here is fascinating. The wind would happen and it was menagain me'elav. Okay? This is next pay level here. This is not normal. The language of the Gemara is super clear. It wasn't the wind that was causing the playing. It was menagain me'elav. It was at the same time as the wind. And when the wind happened, the playing happened. Miyad haya David omeid va'osek b'Torah. No snooze buttons for David HaMelech. Popped out of bed the second he heard the music, and he was osek b'Torah ansha Allah amud hashachar halavai shenizken. That's beautiful. Now, we didn't get to our part of the story yet, because what we're trying to figure out is whether or not we need Sanhedrin or the Urim V'tumim to paskin on war. So says the Gemara, 5 lines from the bottom, Kevan Sha'al Amad HaShachar, when the sun would come up, Nichnasu Chachmei Yisrael, let's know, in the morning, by Vasikin, he would daven a great Shacharis, and then after that, people would come ask him questions. Amrulo, Adonenu HaMelech, Amcha Yisrael Tzrichin Leparnasa, please help, there are so many Yidden who need food. Amar Lehen Lechuvis Parnasu Zemizel. Robin Hood, have the wealthy support the poor. That's how we run our communities. Amrlo, ein hakometz maspias ha'ari. This little handful of flour is not going to satiate a lion. We got a lot of mouths to feed. We have a lot of babies. We have a lot of kids. Baruch Hashem, b'li ayin hara. And ve'ein abor mismale michul yasa. This is a mashal. Is that if you shovel out dirt, you'll never be able to put it back in the same way, which is just a mashal, basically saying there isn't enough money to go around. Amar lehem, no problem. L'chu pasha yidechem b'gdud. There's a machlokas as to what exactly is going on over here, but it seems to be that he's saying that you should go to war. An unbelievable zach. Miyad, when that happened, and here's where we're going to connect this back to our Gemara. What was David's methodology to approve a war? Miyad, Yoatzin va'achitofel. They would go ask advice from Achitofel. V'nim lachin b'Sanhedrin, and he would go talk to the Sanhedrin. And what would they do? Look at this. The shoalim be'urim v'tumim. Beautiful. So says the Gemara, Amar of Yosef Ma'ikra. What's the pasuk that indicates that this is the case? We're at the very top of Tezayin Amud Beis. We will finish at the very bottom of the page, second to last line. Mirta Hashem. I hope you all daven Marv. Look at this pasuk. It's really not a full sentence. After Achitofel was Benayo ben Yehoyada and Evyasar, and then the general of the war. Achitofel ze Yoetz. That was what we said. That David HaMelech would ask Eitzah from Achitofel. And then after that, Uvnayo ben Yehoyada zu Sanhedrin. He was one of the greatest Talmidei Chachamim in that era. Evyasar was a Kohen Urim v'Tumim. Crazy and Placey, we know, is actually a reference to the Urim V'Tumim. V'lama nikra Shimon Crazy Placey. Why was it that the Urim V'Tumim was called as Crazy Shekorsen Divrain? Their words were extremely clear. That's what Rashi says over here. Shekorsen, 7-8 lines down. Shekorsen Chodchen Dvarim Be'emunasa. Words that we don't really totally understand. They would cut words with their emunah, or be'emunasa, their skill. Well, again, I don't know which word it means. The Gemara says that's why they called it crazy. That it was totally wondrous what was happening over there. There was mamish nisim v'niflos. The crazy uplesi is also the name of a book in Psak Halacha. There's a famed sheet of the crazy uplesi that basar b'chalav never falls into the category of nosein tam lifgam. Huge chumrah. Just speak that out. That means that if you ever use a kli that's milchik for fleshings or vice versa, you could never do hagala, because it's never not nosein tam lifkam. It always stays as a positive flavor, and therefore it's basar b'chalav doraisa, and therefore you can never use the kli. A huge chumrah. We don't paskin that way. How many times have I put a milchik spoon in a fleshik dishwasher? A trillion. It happens all the time. Almost every time I take stuff out of there, I'm like, again. Ladino, we're makel because we assume that there's soap, whatever, we're makel. The crazy place he holds, that's completely awesome. So this has nothing to do with our Gemara, other than the fact that the name of his sefer was crazy place. What?
It is unusual sefer on your day.
Yeah. Also, I think he was talking about his own sefer. It's a very confident title, no? He's a course in Divrei. Maybe he was talking about the first one. Okay. And then after the Urim V'Tumim were discussed, then Sar Tzva L'Melech Yoav. Then they'd go to the general and he would start the war. We had a whole process. We had a workflow. Very good. Amar Rav Yitzchak Breder V'Adav Amar Rav Yitzchak Bar Avdimi Ma'ikra. And here, actually, this is a little confusing. This pasuk is going back to something we said before. Look at Rashi, gorgeous Rashi, so helpful. Ma'ikra dekinor talui al mitaso shel David umakitzo leDavid mishnaso. Back in the Gemara. Ura chvodi ura hanavel v'chinor a'ira shachar. That David woke the morning up. Namely, David was up before the morning, and that's how we know that he woke up super early. 2 dots, a quarter of the way down Mosif and Ala'ir. If we want to extend the city limits of Yerushalayim, it has to be with a bezin of Shivim ve'achas minan emili. How do we know? Pasuk says, and I should say, let me say better. Amar of Simi Barchia Amar Kra. The pasuk says, this is a pasuk in Shmos. The pasuk says, "Kichol Hashem ani mareo secha eis tavnis hamishkan," and then we know the rest. Eis tavnis kol kela v'chein ta'asu ledoros habayim. So there, that's something that would be true for future generations. And just like the tavnis of the Mishkan, the borders of the Mishkan were determined by a bezdin shel shivim ve'echad, really Moshe, but Moshe is the equivalent of shivim ve'echad. So to any other borders that need to be changed in the future. If we would want to properly expand Har HaBayis, That's possible, but it's only with the Bezdin of Shivim V'achas. You want to extend the borders of Yerushalayim? That's also possible, but only with the Bezdin of Shivim V'achas. Masiv Rava, wait 1 second. Kol HaKelim Shasam Moshe Meshichasam Mekadshan. All the kelim that Moshe made for the Mishkan, so the anointing of the oil was what made them holy. So mikan ve'elech avodasa mechanachtan, but the use of them in the future after Moshe, in the first and second Batei Mikdash, and in any other application of the Mishkan, the fact that you would use a kli was what made it holy. Ve'amai. But why would we say that? Nema, perhaps we should say v'chein ta'asu, that when the pasuk says v'chein ta'asu, that it's referring to L'doros Habayim, that we also need to have Mashiach. Says the Gemara, Shiny Hasam, that case is different. The pasuk says he anointed them and then he sanctified them. Osam b'Mashiach, those, the ones that Moshe made, those were made holy by anointing, but v'lo L'doros b'Mashiach, but not in the future. The Gemara says, "Ve'ema osam b'Mashiach v'Ladoros." Maybe we should, Ve'ema osam b'Mashiach. Maybe you're right that Moshe, the ones that he anointed with oil. But uladoros for the future, ibe meshicha, ibe avoda. Perhaps it's either one. Either we can anoint it with oil, if we were to have, or once they are used, then they are considered to be holy. So Amar Rav Papa, Amar Kra, no. Asher Yashar Subam Bakodesh Akasuv Tlon B'Sherus. He says, the pasuk says that the way a kli becomes holy is not through Mashiach anymore. That was only in the times of Moshe. But nowadays, Akasuv Tlon B'Sherus, says the Gemara, Ella Osam Lamali. Then why do I need the word osam? Ilav osam, says the Gemara. Havamina l'doros b'mashicha uve'avoda. Without the word osam describing those utensils, I might have thought that all utensils would then need both mashicha and avoda, anointing and use in the mikdash, in order to become mekudash, in order to become holy. So therefore, kasav rachmana osam, the word osam becomes a limiting word. Those kalim to say osam b'mashicha, v'lo l'doros b'mashicha. And that is how the Gemara concludes, that in the times of Moshe, what made the kalim holy and useful for the Beis HaMikdash ready to be used was the fact that there was Mashiach oil. However, in the Doros in the future, Mir Tashem Bekara will be able to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, and we don't need the oil to anoint the kalim. What we're going to do is just start using them. In the moment you start using them, then they become holy and eligible for the Beis HaMikdash. Halfway down 3 lines before the wide lines. Vein osin Sanhedros, you cannot make the Sanhedrin of 23 without a Bezdin of 71. Minolan, how do we know? Kede ashkechan b'Moshe, deuki Sanhedros, u'Moshe b'makom, shivim v'chad kohen. Moshe was an equivalent to 71. He was, the pasuk says, "Vaye'asvu shivim zakenim," that Moshe gathered the 71. If he can gather the 71, he's equivalent to the 71. And because the Sanhedrin of 71 had to make the Sanhedrin Ketana of 23, we therefore learn that from Moshe. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis teach us on the first of the long lines. Minayin shema'amidin shoftim leYisrael. How do we know that we need judges for the Jewish people? Tamalomar shoftim titain. So that's actually not what the pasuk says. Shoftim v'shotarim titain l'cha b'chol sharecha. So what we're going to see is all of the drushos that we're going to see for the next few lines are an abridged drusha. The words exist in the pasuk, but not next to each other. So we just have to remember, we have to know these psukim better. So if you want to look on the side where the pasuk is quoted, you'll be able to see this in full. And shotrim liYisrael minat. How do we know that we need a shoter, someone who's going to enforce Jewish law? Talmudom are shotrim titain. I shoftim l'chol shevet v'shevet minai. Now you've told me that we need shoftim for Yisrael. How do we know that each shevet needs one? Talmudom are shoftim l'shvatecha. Shotrim l'chol shevet v'shevet minai. How do we know that we need to have a shoter, someone to enforce Jewish law within each shevet? Talmudom are shotrim l'shvatecha. What about shoftim l'chol ir ve'ir minai? So now we have broad for Klal Yisrael level 1, broad for each shevet level 2, and then more local shoftim l'chol ir ve'ir minai. Talmudom are shoftim l'sharecha. Therefore, each city needs to have their own system. And shotrim l'chol ir ve'ir minayin tamlamar shotrim l'sharecha. And Rabbi Yehuda is not arguing; he's adding. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, echad memuna al kulan shneimar titein l'chad. There should be one bezdin that's bigger than all the others and is responsible. So it's a hierarchy where the biggest bezdin is responsible for all the second tier. It's like a management structure. It's senior leader, middle management, and lower management. So we need a structure like that. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rashba gomer lishvatecha b'shaftu mitzvah b'shevet ladun es shivto. This is a fascinating din, that a bezdin within one shevet is supposed to watch over their own city. And look at what Rashi says, 7 lines from the bottom of the page. In the Rashi, Zibra Maskel mitzvah b'shevet ladun es shivto, v'lo yelchu b'nei shevet zel bezdin shel shevet acher. If I am in Shevet Dan and I know that the Bezdin in Shevet Asher is more Mekel, no. First of all, you shouldn't shop for Rabbanim. But even if you wanted to, you're not allowed to do that. Stay in your shtut. Stay exactly where you belong. Don't go anywhere else. Fascinating. All right, a couple more sugyas. We're getting there. We've made some headway, but we're running out of time. Venos and Ir Hanidachas. Ir Hanidachas can only be determined with 71. Minu Animili. Amar Rav Chia Bar Yosef, Amar Rav Oshai, Amar Krabot, Seisasa Isha Hu. Oh, Esai Shahi. Ish Isha Tamotze Lisharecha. If you have a man or a woman as an individual and they did avodah zarah, we're going to judge them in a bezdin of 23 because that's capital punishment. And whenever there's a bezdin for murder, for ketala, it needs 23. But via tamotze kol your kulo lisharecha. But the whole city, when the whole city does avodah zarah, we don't take them to a bezdin of 23. We take them to a bezdin of 71. Next, we don't take a border city and destroy it for Ir Nidachas, even if they do the Avera. That city can't be shaykh by destroying the whole city, my time, because from within the city limits, not on the border. That's a diuk. We're going to see a svar to this a little bit later. Below shalosh, no three cities can be destroyed next to one another. We'll see soon why that's the case. The pasuk says achas. Because the pasuk says achas, what does that mean? So if you look at the pasuk at the bottom over there, it says kisishma be'achas arecha. That you did avodah zarah there, you should be destroyed. Achas, aval os and achas oshtayim. You can't do three, but you can do one or two next to each other. That's fine. So if you have city 1, 2, 3, and they're in sequence, city 1 can happen, city 2 can happen, city 1 and 3 can happen, city 2 and 3 can happen. You can't have three in a row. And the Gemara wants to know why. We'll see in a moment why this is true. But first, let's analyze the drasha. Tana Rabban. The rabbis have taught us 10 lines from the bottom of the page. Sheu Omer Arecha Haresh Taim Amor. I skipped a line. Tana Rabban Achas v'lo shalosh. The Brisa says 1, but not 3, which is a weird diuk. No, why would you say 1 and not 3? You should have said 1 and not 2. Zag the Gemara, Ata Omer Achas v'lo shalosh. Oh, anyway, Achas v'lo shtayim. Why did you skip 2? If you have Achas, you should make a diuk to 2, not to 3. Says the Gemara, we can't make a diuk to 2 that Achas v'lo shtayim because, says the Gemara, Omer Arecha Aresh Shtayim Amor. When we say Arecha, that's plural. So we know that 2 cities can be next to each other and be destroyed within the psak of Ir Nidachas. Amani Mekayim Achas, it must be Achas v'lo shalosh. And then Zimnin, says the Gemara, sometimes Amarab bebezdin echad hu de'ein osen hashnayim habishnayim v'shlosha batei din osen. It's just that one bezdin can't paskin that 3 cities in a row could be destroyed. But if bezdin number 1 paskin that city number 1 could be destroyed, and bezdin number 2 paskin that city 2 can be destroyed, and bezdin number 3 paskin that bezdin 3 can be destroyed, and they're sequentially located, that's fine according to version number 1 of Rav. However, v'zimnan amar Rav, no. We're never allowed to do 3 cities next to each other, even if the psakim of Ir Nidachas came from different batei din. My time of the Rav, mishum korcha. Rav says the reason why we're never allowed to do 3 in a row. Yes, there's a svara to say that separate batei dinim should be able to, but he doesn't like it because we don't want to have bald spots on the Jewish map. Namely, we don't want to have spots that, we look speckled. People live here, people don't live there. We don't want to have destroyed cities. This is only true. The limitation of 3 cities in a row that we say we can't have 3 Ir Nidachas in a row. That's true if they're in the same locale. But if they're in different locations, no problem. Rav Yochanan Amar Ein Osin Mishum Korcha. Same svara as before. Tani Kavased Rav Yochanan. Let's see. Heading to the bottom of the page, 6 lines from the bottom. Ein Osin Shalosh Ayoros Menudachos Be'eretz Yisrael. You're not allowed to have 3 of them in Eretz Yisrael. Aval Osin Osam Shtayim. You can have 2 in a row. Kigon Achas Beyehuda Achas Begalil. Oh, whole different twist. Now, in different sections, you can have it. I can have an isolated one in the southern part of Eretz Yisrael, one in the north, and one in the Transjordan area. No problem. Aval Shtayim Beyehuda V'Shtayim Begalil Ein Osin. You can't do 2 in each place. Usmucha l'sapar, next to the border. Afilu achas ein osin. We never do anything by the border. My taima shema yishmu nachrim ve'achribu es Eretz Yisrael, because maybe our enemies will see that border city has nobody in it, and they'll use it as a staging ground to attack, and that's unacceptable. V'tepuk lei that a sapar, that a border city can't be an Ir Nidachas from the pasuk the mikir becha amar achmanav lo minas sapar. Says the Gemara, Why aren't we learning this from the pasuk? Why is it that Reb Shimon is telling us this? Then Reb Shimon, who the darish time of the kra. This is actually a machlokas Rishonim. Are we darish time of the kra? He's looking at the pasuk. The pasuk says mikir b'cha, and he's giving a my time. Why does the Torah say that a border city is not allowed to become an irani dachas? That's because he's dorish time of the kra. The reason why is because if you have a border city that's an irani dachas, our enemies will use it as a staging ground, and that's something that's very dangerous. We'll stop right here. I know we're behind. We'll catch up when we catch up. We're 2 lines from the bottom on Tazayin and Beis. On Shabbos Emir Tashem at 2:50, we'll pick up right here. Wishing you all a beautiful night.